In this short series of videos, I'm talking about what I call the circuit station system, or just station system. It's my view, my perspective on residential electrical service. In other words, it's an easy way for me to understand the electrical service in my home. I figured this out many years ago. Now, this is pretty much all theory and not practice. In other words, my ideas are theoretical. It's the way I look at the electrical system and how it works. In practice, everything's still the same. The installation, the hardware, the components and all that, that's all the same. I'm focusing on theory here. I'm focusing on looking at my electrical service in a different way with slightly different terms. Thus far, I've shown how I consider the service station, or you might call it a service entrance panel. I've shown how I consider that part of the system, all right? And I've shown why I call it a station. In other words, I consider the circuit to really start at the transformer and end at the end of any given station circuit, or what you might call a branch circuit. So you see, I clearly consider the service station as part of the circuit, part of the system. And here's the little circuit stations, right, that happen on your station circuit, all right? So today I'm going to show examples here in my basement of each of the 6 stations. See, I call them stations. There's 6, and they each have an in function, which I talked about. So now I'm going to go around and show you some examples of what they are and why I call them that. So here is what I call my service station, or service entrance station. You would call it a service entrance panel. It's just a matter of new terminology. Now here we have an interface. This is your main breaker. This is an interface for your service entrance conductors and your power bus bars, okay? That's your device or interface. You have your service entrance conductors coming in, then you have your 2 power bus bars in there, and your station breakers here, your station circuit breakers, you would call them just branch circuit breakers. That's your interface between your power bus bars, all right, and your station circuits, or what you would call branch circuits. Previously, when I talked about the protection features for the service entrance station or service station, I mentioned several. One of your protection features is your main breaker here, all right? And I just happen to have a surge protector, and most people nowadays will have to have this by code. All right, I have my surge protector, the grounding system inside. There's a grounding system that runs outside, and it runs over to my cold water pipe. And then, of course, there's the cover, the protective cover. Now, all these protection features are what I call resident. They're within the outlet. Now you say, no, that's outside. That's remote. No, actually, I just consider this resident because it's right beside it. And a lot of times when electricians install these protectors, what they'll do is they'll wire them into the breakers and sometimes just set them inside the panel there. So I consider this a resident form of protection because everything's all like right in here. So that covers the service station. The next station on my list is what I call a routing station, or you would probably call it a junction box. It's the same thing. I just call it a routing station, all right? And all your cables intersect in there. They converge in here. And here's your cover. That's a form of protection. And then there's your grounding wires inside your grounding system, all right? So you have some resident protection in there. Here you have a switch station. It's a giant switch. It's a disconnect, but it's still a switch. It's just a giant switch here. All right, so that's a station. And here's a receptacle station, that's what I call it, because you push your plug into the slots and it receives. It's called receptacle. Very, very simple. It's just that I just look at these outlets. In other words, the configuration here, an outlet would be the box and anything attached to it or confined within it. I just look at it differently, that's all. Here's another switch station. There's two switches in this station. This switch is a single station switch. That's what I call it. A single station switch. You would call this a single pole switch, which is a stupid name. I call it a single station switch because it's one switch found at one station. Okay, very simple. This switch here is what I call a double station switch because it takes two of these to work to turn the lights on. Double station, because you'll find a switch at each station, and you would call it a three-way switch. That's what you would call it, which is an idiotic name, and I hate it. I changed all that. I fixed all that in previous videos, but you'd call that a three-way switch. I call it a double station switch because in this particular setup, you will find two switches, a double, one at each station. Double station switch, single station switch. You can never get confused when you use my switch naming system. I don't have an example to show you of an appliance station because my appliance stations are concealed. For example, my cooktop, I can't show you that because I'd have to take the drawers out of the cabinets to get to it. But I have appliance stations, but I can't show them. And then I have no unassigned stations. In other words, all the stations in my home are assigned and they're being used, they're powered up and they're being used. But while I'm here, I wanted to show you this. When you look at a receptacle station, you might recall in my system, okay, it can be a plug receptacle or a lamp receptacle, right? So if you have a receptacle station, okay, and it's a lamp receptacle, okay, that's your lamp receptacle right there. You might call it a socket, but that's the receptacle part. When you look at your station component, you would see that this is the outlet, okay, your electrical box, that's the outlet component, all right? And then here, you see that this would be called a fixture. And inside the fixture is the actual receptacle, and it's precisely a lamp receptacle. So you have your outlet and your fixture, and you say, oh, okay, that's a receptacle station. It's obvious. All right? But then you have a piece of equipment like this. It has a lamp receptacle in it, all right, and a switch. So when you're setting up your station, you have your basic component, your outlet box here, all right? And then you have your forms of protection. But you have here, you have a receptacle station and a switch station all in one. That's kind of a neat thing. I wanted to show you that. And I think that's it for today. So I'll probably come back with a summary and kind of wrap it up, but I'm just showing you theoretically what I do. It's in practice, all the parts and equipment, the hands-on stuff are the same, okay? It's just theory, it's perspective, it's the way I look at it, and in my mind, it makes it very, very clear for me. So thanks for being incredibly patient, and we'll see you soon.